The will was a short, sharp shock. My great-grandmother, Ilara, had always been a distant, almost spectral figure in my life, a whispered name associated with old houses and even older, stranger stories. When her lawyer called, I expected a dusty antique chest or perhaps a forgotten piece of jewelry. What I received, however, was a single peculiar instruction. A tall, ornate mirror, wrapped entirely in a thick, black velvet cloth, was to be mine, and with it, a warning, delivered by my Aunt Beatrice with a tremor in her voice that belied her usual stoicism. Never, under any circumstances, remove the cloth, Alex. Just don't. I inherited the mirror, not as a cherished family heirloom, but as a silent, foreboding presence. It stood in the corner of my living room, a dark, draped monolith, a stark contrast to the modern, minimalist decor I usually favored. For weeks, I obeyed Aunt Beatrice's instruction. It was easy enough to ignore, a piece of macabre art, a conversation starter for the few friends brave enough to ask about the shrouded object in my otherwise bright apartment. But the curiosity, a persistent, gnawing itch beneath my skin, grew with each passing day. It was the kind of curiosity that feels less like a choice and more like an inevitability, a slow-burning fuse leading to an unknown explosive. What was under that cloth? A family secret? A grotesque image? Or perhaps, as the whispered family legends implied, something far more sinister? My great-grandmother had been an eccentric, a recluse rumored to dabble in things, unexplained phenomena, strange rituals, and a collection of oddities that had long since been dispersed, most of them lost to time or deliberately forgotten. This mirror was the last remnant, the one thing she'd held on to until her dying day, the one thing she explicitly willed to me. The very specificity of the instruction, the stark finality of the warning, only intensified my resolve. One rainy Tuesday night, the kind of night where the city lights blur into an impressionistic smear and the wind sounds like a mournful sigh, I finally gave in. The apartment was silent, save for the drumming rain against the window pane. A shiver, not of cold, but of anticipation, traced its way up my spine. I stood before the mirror, its shrouded form looming taller than me, its presence almost palpable. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet room. My fingers, trembling slightly, reached for the heavy fabric. The cloth was thick, surprisingly dense, almost as if it had been woven to contain something, not just conceal it. It smelled faintly of dust and something else, something metallic and cold, like old iron or forgotten blood. As I began to pull it down, a faint whisper seemed to brush past my ear, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement, or perhaps just the wind playing tricks. I ignored it, my focus entirely on the unveiling. The black velvet slid away with a soft whoosh, revealing the mirror beneath. It was magnificent, antique, certainly, with an ornate dark wood frame, intricately carved with what looked like twisting vines and grotesque, almost gargoyle-like faces peering from the corners. The glass itself was old, with a subtle patina, but surprisingly clear. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. And then I saw it, my reflection. It was me, undeniably. My dark hair pulled back into a messy bun, my eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, my faded t-shirt and jeans. But there was something off, Something profoundly, chillingly wrong. My reflection wasn't just my own, it had its own subtle movements. As I took a breath, my reflection seemed to inhale a fraction of a second before me, its chest rising just a beat too early. My eyes in the mirror seemed to linger on my own, a fraction longer than they should have, with an unnerving intensity. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, its lips began to stretch. My own lips were pressed into a thin line of apprehension, but the reflection's mouth widened slowly into a smile. It was wider than my own mouth could ever naturally stretch, and sharper, revealing teeth that seemed just a little too long, too pointed. The corners of its eyes crinkled, but not with mirth. It was a predatory, knowing smile, one that spoke of ancient hunger and malicious amusement. A cold dread, unlike anything I had ever known, seeped into my bones. This wasn't a trick of the light or my imagination. This was real. This was not me. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. The reflection's smile widened further, its eyes tracking my movement niched with an unnerving precision. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, hoping it was a hallucination, a trick of my sleep-deprived mind. But it was still there, my doppelganger grinning back at me, its eyes glinting with a malevolent light. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other, one of us breathing, the other a silent, mocking imitation. My reflection raised its hand, slowly, its fingers splayed. I involuntarily flinched. Its hand mirrored mine, but its movements were fluid, deliberate, almost balletic, while mine were stiff with terror. It was like watching a perfectly synchronized, yet utterly alien performance. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The smile on its face never faltered. It was a fixed, unchanging rictus of glee. I felt a strange, yet chilling sensation, as if something cold and ethereal was reaching out from the mirror, brushing against my consciousness. A whisper, this time undeniably real, seemed to slither into my mind, a voice that sounded like my own, yet was filled with a chilling, echoing resonance. "Hello, Alex." Panic flared, hot and sharp. I spun around, tearing my gaze from the mirror, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers fumbling, my mind screaming for a distraction, for an explanation. I needed to call someone, anyone, but what would I say? My reflection is smiling at me with too many teeth. I forced myself to breathe, to think. I had to understand this. My great-grandmother's warning, the family legends. This wasn't just an old mirror. It was a cursed object, a gateway, something out of a creepypasta or an urban legend brought to terrifying life in my own living room. I spent the rest of the night huddled on my sofa, my back to the mirror, a blanket pulled tight around me, though it did nothing to ward off the internal chill. Every creak of the old building, every rustle of the wind outside sent a jolt of terror through me. I kept imagining its eyes on my back, its smile growing wider in the darkness. The next morning, exhaustion heavy in my limbs, I cautiously approached the mirror again. The black cloth lay crumpled on the floor. I didn't dare touch it. My reflection stared back. It was me, perfectly normal. My hair was a mess, my eyes bloodshot, my face pale. But the smile was gone. The eyes were my own. It was just a mirror. My mind, however, refused to accept it. The memory of that malevolent grin, those two sharp teeth, was seared into my consciousness. Had I imagined it? Was it a hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep? The logical part of my brain desperately clung to that explanation, but the primal fear in my gut screamed otherwise. I spent the next few days in a state of heightened anxiety. I avoided the mirror, keeping it covered with a makeshift sheet I'd found, a flimsy barrier against what I now suspected was an active, malevolent presence. But even covered, I felt its gaze, a constant, subtle pressure on my back, a prickling sensation on my skin. When I walked past it, I'd unconsciously quicken my pace, my breath held tight. My sleep became fractured, haunted by dreams of being trapped in a mirrored room, endless reflections of myself, all of them smiling that same predatory grin. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the silence of my apartment amplifying the sound of my own ragged breathing. The psychological toll was immense. I found myself checking my own reflection in windows, in my phone screen, in puddles on the street, just to confirm it was really me. Was my smile too wide? Did my eyes linger too long? I started to doubt my own expressions, my own identity. Was I truly myself, or was a subtle shift taking place? I started researching, not just cursed mirrors or doppelganger legends, but more obscure terms: reflection entities, shadow selves, spirit traps. I delved into online forums, some dedicated to urban legends, others to allege true scary stories. I stumbled upon dark web archives, old digital libraries filled with scanned, crumbling manuscripts. The internet, a vast ocean of information, quickly became a terrifying source of confirmation. I found fragmented accounts, chillingly similar to my own experience, tales of mirrors that stole souls, reflections that gained sentience, entities that mimicked and then replaced their human counterparts. One particular story, buried deep in an old forum post from the late 90s, caught my eye. It spoke of a family in New England, generations of them, who owned an ornate, dark wood mirror. The post was vague, riddled with misspellings, but the core narrative was clear. The reflection would slowly, subtly begin to move independently. First, a blink out of sync, then a shift of expression. Finally, a full, independent existence within the glass. The post ended abruptly with a chilling line. They said the last one, the daughter, she looked in it too long. They found her staring, her eyes empty, and the reflection, it smiled and walked away from the glass. Let's Not Meet stories often revolved around encounters with terrifying strangers. But what if the stranger was yourself? What if you couldn't not meet them because they were always there, waiting in the glass? This was a new level of horror, a psychological torment that burrowed deep into my mind. The subtle changes began again, even with the mirror covered. I'd catch glimpses of movement from the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow, a distortion in the periphery, always near the covered mirror. Sometimes I'd hear faint whispers, not distinct words, but a low, sibilant murmur that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the air around the draped object. It was like listening to a conversation through a thick wall, just enough to know it was happening, but never enough to understand. One evening, I was making tea in the kitchen, the mirror a good 20 feet away, out of my direct line of sight. I heard a distinct thump from the living room. I froze, kettle in hand, my blood running cold. It sounded like something had fallen. I slowly walked into the living room. Nothing seemed out of place. The sheet over the mirror was undisturbed. But then I noticed it. A small, ornate silver photo frame, which had been sitting on the mantelpiece across the room from the mirror, was now lying face down on the rug. It hadn't fallen, it had been moved. It was too far from the edge of the mantelpiece to simply topple. I picked it up, my hands shaking. It was a photo of my parents. I glanced at the covered mirror. Was it playing games? Was it trying to get my attention? The incidents escalated. I'd leave my keys on the coffee table, only to find them later on the floor by the mirror. My favorite book, left on my nightstand, would appear on the armchair directly facing the mirror. It was a subtle, unnerving invasion, a constant reminder that something was active, watching, waiting. It was like a poltergeist, but one with a singular, terrifying focus: me. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. It wasn't just a sense, it was a pressure, a tangible weight on my shoulders, a constant chill on the back of my neck. I started sleeping with the lights on, a futile attempt to ward off the unseen presence. My apartment, once a sanctuary, had become a prison. One night, I woke up abruptly. The room was bathed in the dim, orange glow of the streetlights outside. My eyes snapped open, and I immediately felt it. A profound, bone-chilling cold emanating from the corner where the mirror stood. The air was thick, heavy, almost viscous. And then I heard it. A faint scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across glass, coming from behind the sheet. My heart leapt into my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the blanket tighter, willing it to stop, willing myself back to sleep. But the sound continued, slow and deliberate, a rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape. It sounded like something was trying to get out, or in. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear, the paranoia, the creeping sense of losing my mind. It was too much. I had to face it, or I would break. With a surge of desperate courage, I threw off the covers and stumbled out of bed. The scraping stopped the moment my feet touched the floor. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the sound. I approached the mirror, my legs feeling like lead. My hand reached for the sheet, my fingers brushing against the rough fabric. My breath hitched. I could feel a faint vibration, a hum, coming from the wood frame beneath the sheet. I yanked the sheet off. My reflection was there, as always. But this time, it wasn't just subtly off. It was overtly, undeniably, horrifyingly wrong. Its head was tilted at an angle that would have broken a human neck. Its eyes, my eyes, were wide, dilated, and glowed with a faint, sickly green light. The smile was back, wider than ever, a rictus of pure malice, the teeth elongated and needle-sharp. But it wasn't just smiling. It was laughing, silently, but I could see the movement of its throat, the shaking of its shoulders, the sheer, unadulterated joy twisting its features. And its hand was pressed against the surface of the glass, its fingers splayed, reaching out. Not mirroring my hand, it was reaching, straining, as if pressing against an invisible barrier. And as I watched, horrified, the glass around its fingertips began to ripple like water. A low, guttural growl, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air in the room, emanated from the reflection. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was a sound of immense power, of ancient hunger, of something finally breaking free. Then its lips moved, slowly, deliberately, and it spoke. Its voice was a distorted echo of my own, deep and resonant, yet laced with a chilling, inhuman rasp. "You waited too long." My blood ran cold. The words hung in the air, thick with menace. The reflection's eyes, glowing green, locked onto mine. I felt a sudden, powerful pull, as if an invisible rope had been tied around my chest and was yanking me forward towards the mirror. My feet slid on the wooden floor, dragging me closer, closer to that horrifying grin. I clawed at the air, desperate to resist, but the pull was overwhelming. My reflection's hand pressed harder against the glass, its fingers seeming to stretch, to elongate. The ripples in the mirror intensified, spreading outwards. I could see the room behind my reflection, distorted and warped, the colors bleeding into each other like a nightmare landscape. "Come, join me," it hissed, its voice a symphony of static and dread. I was almost at the mirror, my face inches from the glass. I could see my own terror reflected in its glowing eyes, superimposed over its malevolent glee. I could feel the cold emanating from the glass, a biting chill that seemed to penetrate my very soul. My reflection's mouth opened wider, impossibly wide, revealing a black void within, a swirling darkness that threatened to consume me. In a desperate, primal surge of self-preservation, I screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound, ripped from the depths of my being, and with that scream, I found a fleeting surge of strength. I lunged to the side, breaking free of the invisible pull, stumbling backwards away from the mirror. My reflection roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the apartment. Its hand slammed against the glass, and a spider web of cracks erupted from where its fingers had pressed. The glowing green light in its eyes flared, momentarily blinding me. I fell to the floor, scrambling away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My eyes were fixed on the mirror, on the crack in glass, on the furious, distorted face of my doppelganger. It was snarling, its teeth bared, its eyes burning with frustrated rage. It hammered against the inside of the glass, its monstrous strength causing more cracks to splinter across the surface. I had to destroy it. It was the only way. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything, a weapon, a tool. My gaze landed on a heavy antique brass poker from the fireplace. It was old, solid, and heavy. With a surge of adrenaline, I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the poker, its cold metal reassuring in my trembling hand. I swung it, not thinking, not hesitating. All my fear, my terror, my desperate need for survival went into that single blow. The poker struck the center of the mirror with a sickening crunch. The glass exploded outwards, showering the room with glittering shards. A deafening shriek, inhuman and filled with pure agony, tore through the air, shaking the very walls. The air grew impossibly cold, then hot, then cold again, as if something immense and terrible was being torn apart. I collapsed onto my knees, the poker falling from my numb fingers, breathing heavily, my body shaking uncontrollably. The mirror was shattered, a gaping hole in its ornate frame, only jagged remnants of glass clinging to the edges. The grotesque faces carved into the frame seemed to twist in silent horror. Silence. Absolute, profound silence. The storm outside had died down. The apartment was still. I stayed there for a long time, curled on the floor amidst the glittering debris, listening to the frantic pounding of my own heart. It was over. It had to be. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed myself up. My eyes scanned the shattered mirror. There was no reflection now, only the dark wall behind it, broken by slivers of glass. The cold was gone, the pressure was gone. The apartment felt empty, but the emptiness wasn't a relief. It was a void. I lived in a hotel for a week, unable to return to my apartment. When I finally did, the mirror was gone. I had called a junk removal service, given them strict instructions. Just take the broken mirror. Don't touch anything else. Don't look inside the frame. They had complied, no questions asked. Perhaps they were used to strange requests. The apartment felt clean, sterile, but it also felt wrong. The air was too still, the silence too deep. I tried to go back to normal. I threw away all the broken glass, cleaned the frame, and eventually, after much internal debate, sold the ornate wooden frame to an antique dealer. I told myself it was just an old mirror, a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination, a stress-induced hallucination. But I knew the truth. The truth lives in the periphery now, in the fleeting shadows that seem to dance in my peripheral vision, in the sudden, unexplained cold spots in my apartment, even with the heating on full, in the faint, almost imperceptible whispers that sometimes brush past my ear when I'm alone, just at the edge of hearing. And the truth lives in my own reflection. Sometimes, when I look into a window at night or catch a glimpse of myself in a polished surface, I see it, just for a fraction of a second. My own eyes in the reflection seem to linger a beat too long. My smile in the reflection seems to stretch just a little too wide, a little too sharp. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a flicker of something else in its eyes, a faint, sickly green glow, before it vanishes. The mirror is gone, but I am not free. The entity, the doppelganger, the thing that wanted to cross over, it left a mark. Or perhaps a part of it did cross over, not through the glass, but into me. I am no longer just Alex. I am Alex and something else. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I find myself humming a tune I've never heard before, a low, sibilant melody, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. And I wonder which one of us is truly humming it.
Thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.